This episode is brought to you by Marvel Studios Echo. All episodes streaming January 9th, only on Hulu and Disney+. Rated TV MALV. Viewer discretion advised. Maya Lopez has betrayed her mentor, the notorious Kingpin. Now on the run, she returns to her hometown to prepare for the biggest fight of her life. Don't miss Marvel Studios' hardest-hitting series yet. An epic 5-episode event. Marvel Studios Echo. All episodes streaming January 9th, only on Hulu and Disney+.
Hello, and welcome to Scare You to Sleep. I'm your host, Shelby Scott. How are you this week? I don't know if you're into woo, but Mercury is in retrograde right now, and this week I was definitely feeling it. I have the eye twitch and the heartburn to prove it. So, I wasn't able to snag a copy of the trailer for my new show with Parcast like I had hoped, and like I said that I was hoping to do last week. Again, Mercury. But I did get a copy of Nina G. Jones's trailer for her new podcast, Twisted Mirror. Now, if that name sounds familiar to you, it's because it is. Nina wrote two of the most talked about stories I've ever had on the show, The Smile and Good Hair. Both have been known to terrify and turn stomachs. So if you love the prose of Miss Jones, then you'll love her new podcast. Here is a sneak peek.
The Twisted Mirror podcast presents genre and mind-bending stories that reflect the deepest, darkest recesses of the human psyche. These tales aren't just designed to make you double-check your locks at night, but instead will have you questioning if you have already welcomed the monster through your front door. In the tradition of great horror shows like The Twilight Zone, the Twisted Mirror podcast will leave you thinking long after the final words of each story. Looking into the reflection of a warped world, just slightly different than our own, you'll begin to find the lines blurred between the world you know and its reflection in the twisted mirror. Please enjoy this short excerpt from a story entitled, What Came with the Storm.
You are now staring into the twisted mirror.
I made myself a cup of tea and wrapped myself in my dad's heirloom blanket, the one he always kept in the cedar chest, and cozied up in a worn cognac leather chair beside the window. The forest outside was ink black, but the porch light illuminated flecks of sleet raining down along its path. Invisible around it were hints of barren trees and frozen ground. Staring out the window at the harsh weather made me feel even cozier within the cabin walls. After a while, the comforting contrast seduced me toward a warm slumber, and my eyelids began to droop. I thought I should move to an actual bed, and so began the stubborn battle between instant sleep and delayed gratification. A few times my head sagged, and my eyes dropped as I deliberated, each time opening them to the stream of ochre light outside and the pellets of the frozen rain shooting past it. Once, twice, 3 times, maybe 4 or 5 or 6. After the last time I forced my eyelids open, she was there. I jumped in my seat and blinked my eyes in a frenzy, assuming I must have been half asleep and dreaming. But the vision persisted. Out in the dark, freezing storm, directly in the path of the light, stood a little girl, staring back at me. Her arms were at her sides, unmoving as the weather sadistically beat at her. Her wet hair whipped in the wind like a torn sail in an ocean storm. she wore a little red peacoat with white stockings. Thanks for listening. If you want to hear more, subscribe to the Twisted Mirror podcast. And you can also follow me on Instagram at Twisted Mirror Podcast or on Facebook, facebook.com/Twisted Mirror Pod.
Check out Twisted Mirror and subscribe so you don't miss the first episode dropping on October 15th. Now, the title of this week's episode definitely does the combination of these two stories justice. First up is a story from beloved author Tracey Carvill. You know Tracey from her other stories, The Lighthouse Keeper and Can I Come In? This week, I have for you her tale, A Place of Honor. Sally looked at her reflection in the mirror and smiled. She had spent a long time on this costume, and it had, in her humble opinion, all paid off. She turned to and fro to admire the movement of her dress. Multiple layers of delicate white fabric almost floated in the air, ragged, but yet still elegant. Her blonde hair fell in loose curls over her shoulders, and her pale skin was powdered to be even paler. The only bit of color to her was in her blue eyes, which were sparkling with excitement. This was her favorite time of year. She loved the costumes, the parties, the chill of autumn in the air, the warm, spiced drinks. She always tried to go all out, and this year, she had outdone herself. She had to admit, she looked stunning, almost ethereal. With a last dab at the clear gloss on her lips, she turned and hurried out of her room and headed downstairs. It looked just as it should. The decorations were up, the lights were dimmed, and the TV was playing horror movies on a low volume. She smiled at the little black paper bats hanging from the lampshades, the flickering jack-o'-lanterns sitting on each windowsill. In the dining room, the table was laid out with a spiderweb tablecloth and tea lights between large silver platters that would soon carry gingerbread biscuits, shots of vodka jelly, cupcakes with spooky designs and icing, pumpkin pie, toffee apples, and a bowl of hot, alcoholic apple and cinnamon punch, among other tasty delights. Right now, though, the platters were empty, which was odd because she was sure that when she went upstairs to dress, her housemates were getting the food ready in the kitchen. Shouldn't they have gotten it all out by now? The guests would be arriving any moment. She wandered into the kitchen, fully expecting to see them there, standing at counters filled with food and preparation, and braced herself for a torrent of praise for her costume. But the kitchen was empty and spotless. Odd. Maybe they'd popped out for last-minute supplies? She hadn't heard them call her. Confused, she wandered into the living room and perched on the arm of the sofa. Hocus Pocus was playing. They always started the movies with this one. It was a tradition by this point. She loved it. For a while, she let herself relax and watch the movie. But by the time the black flame candle had been lit, she was feeling anxious. People should have been arriving by now, and her flatmates were nowhere to be seen. What was going on? Maybe they were playing a trick on her. Everyone knew how much she loved Halloween, so that was it. They were all hiding in the front garden, waiting for her to look for them. She'd open the door looking all confused, and they'd all shout boo or surprise, and she'd shriek and act surprised, and everyone would laugh, and they'd come inside, and they'd turn on the music and bring out the food, and the party would begin. Of course. Smiling to herself that she'd figured it out, she went to the front door and paused to compose herself. She didn't want to spoil all their effort, so she'd do her best to act like she had no idea. She took a deep breath and put her hand on the door handle. She pushed it down and pulled on the door, but it wouldn't move. Frowning now, she pushed down again. The door handle remained stubbornly in position, refusing to give even an inch. Was the door locked? She didn't feel the lock catching, it just wouldn't move. She peered out through the frosted glass window. Everything outside looked black. No sign of movement, not a single errant cigarette ember or lit-up phone screen to suggest that anyone was out there. She couldn't even see the streetlights. Were they hiding in one of their rooms, or the back garden, perhaps? She hadn't heard anyone come in. Not sure what else to do, she started wandering through each room in the house. The living room was as empty as she'd left it, as was the dining room and the kitchen. She flicked on the light in the bathroom. Empty. She climbed the stairs and checked her housemates' rooms. All empty. The upstairs bathroom, empty. She even checked her own room. Still empty. At a loss and starting to feel a little afraid, Sally wandered downstairs again. She could hear Bette Midler starting to sing "I Put a Spell on You" from the living room. Ignoring it, she turned into the dining room and looked around. The platters on the table were still empty, but there was one thing she hadn't noticed before. A small side table had been placed in front of the fireplace, where they'd usually have a bunch of carved-out pumpkins sat with candles burning inside them. This year, instead, the side table had a single seat placed beside it, between it and the fireplace, so that whoever sat there would face out into the room. And on the table was a single black pillar candle, a glass of red wine, a plate with a selection of food on it, and a piece of folded white card with a name written on it in elegant black ink. Curious, she moved closer to take a look. It was her name on the card. Bemused, she examined the looping script, the little drawings of bats and love hearts that surrounded her name. And the plate contained all the things she loved the most. There was a toffee apple oozing caramel onto the plate, a cupcake with bright green icing and a black cobweb design, a handful of popcorn that she bet was toffee flavored, her favorite, and a little gingerbread vampire with red jelly fangs. This was some kind of surprise. She'd never known her housemates to be so quiet and sneaky. Normally, they'd clomped around like elephants. She smiled and listened for a moment. The house was still completely quiet, except for the movie playing quietly in the other room.
"All right," she called out. "I don't know what you're playing at, but I admit I'm impressed. This is very cute, and I'll play along, okay?"
She paused. Still, silence.
"I'm sitting down now."
Still no answer. With a shrug, she pulled out the chair behind the little table and squeezed in, taking care not to knock the table over. She surveyed the empty room before her, feeling a little silly, and reached out without thinking to pick up the wine glass. As her fingers touched the stem of the glass, there was a sudden sighing in her ears, like a gentle rushing wind around her, though she didn't feel it. Slowly, in front of her eyes, the room began to fill with shadowy figures, moving to and fro, sitting on the chairs that had been pushed to the sides of the room, standing at the dining table, the empty platters filled with featureless shapes that slowly faded into focus, revealing the party foods she had expected to see earlier. The pie, the jellies, the gingerbread biscuits, the cupcakes, bottles of various soft drinks and alcohol materialized behind them, along with a stack of disposable cups. The figures moving around grew clearer and took on the faces of her housemates and friends, all dressed in costumes of monsters, ghouls, and cartoon characters, or just dressed up for a party, all smiling and looking happy. As the rushing sound died away, their voices faded in to take its place, and Sally was surrounded with the sound of laughter, chatting, music playing from someone's phone connected to the Bluetooth speakers on the mantelpiece behind her. Sally sat very still, her hand still on the wine glass, her eyes wide with disbelief. How had they done this? One moment she was alone, and the next. Then Julia, Sally's housemate and best friend, pushed in the room and headed toward her. She was dressed like a witch in a black dress and a pointy hat. Sally looked up at her and smiled, opening her mouth to ask her what was going on. How had they done this? But Julia walked straight past her, pausing at her side to press a button on the speakers and cut the music. She didn't look at Sally once. As the music stopped, the chatter faltered, and everyone turned to look as Julia turned round to address them.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for coming,
she said, raising her voice to be heard as the last bits of conversation died away.
This is a weird speech to be making. I'm gonna try not to mess it up, so bear with me.
There were several sympathetic smiles and nods among the guests. Sally looked up at Julia, confused.
What is it, Julia?
She asked. But her voice seemed very small, and Julia didn't appear to have heard her.
So, there is one important person missing tonight.
Julia went on.
Someone who never ever missed a Halloween party.
A few people laughed, but it sounded sad.
We didn't think it was right not to hold one this year. She would have been so mad at us if we hadn't, and it didn't feel right doing it without her either. So, we thought we'd do something that my gran told me about. Something they used to do back in Ireland, where my family is from.
She gestured to the table where Sally was sitting. Sally gave a small, self-conscious smile.
On All Hallows Eve, it's said that the veil between the living and the dead is at its thinnest, and the spirits of the dead can come back to visit those they love. It was a tradition for those who had lost people to set a place at the table for the ones they'd lost, so they'd feel welcome and could spend some time with them before they had to move on. So, this place is for Sally. This food is for Sally. And we invite you to add something to the table for Sally to enjoy. And to talk to each other about your memories of her. And if Sally is with us tonight, I hope she enjoys the food and has a great time. Just like she always did.
There was a long, sorrowful silence. Sally looked around at everyone, their bowed heads, their solemn expressions, the drinks held forgotten in their hands. And at Julia, her clasped hands and the tears starting to sneak out from beneath her eyelashes. She opened her mouth to protest, but just then, memories started to come back to her, slowly with a cold, creeping despair. She remembered the illness, the tests, the sickness, her long hair falling away, the last couple of months in a hospital bed. She looked down at her hand on the wine glass. It looked solid enough, but she remembered how she had looked in the mirror before she came downstairs. Ghostly, ethereal, the best costume she had ever put together, she had thought. But she couldn't recall when she had made it, when she had bought the fabric. In fact, since the illness, she couldn't remember anything at all. Julia gave an uncomfortable laugh and clapped her hands once, breaking the silence. Right. That's enough of that. This is supposed to be a party, she cried. Happy Halloween, everyone. Glasses were raised, and multiple voices gave the reply, Happy Halloween! Julia turned and restarted the music, and just like that, the moment was over. A song by one of Julia's spooky goth bands came on, and the feeling of despair in Sally's chest began to fade. Now that she knew, now that it all made sense, she realized that it also felt right. Julia moved away, then returned a few minutes later with a mug of hot apple punch. Sally inhaled the lovely smells of cinnamon and rum, smiled as her friend set it down before her. Thank you, Julia, she said, though she knew that she wouldn't hear her. Julia smiled, her eyes looking at, but not really seeing, Sally. Happy Halloween, Sally, she said. We miss you. Then she turned away, raising her hand to wipe away tears. Sally released the wine glass and wrapped her hands around the mug. It felt warm and comforting between her palms. She didn't lift it. She felt instinctively that she wouldn't be able to, but she didn't feel the need to. She just took in the warmth and the smell, and that was enough. More people came forward here and there, putting down a cupcake, a vodka jelly shot, an apple, a slice of cake. Sally's tiny table became cluttered with plates and bowls and cups of festive food and drink. She touched each one, savoring the smells, textures, and colors, and smiled. She couldn't stop smiling. She felt so loved. Somebody shouted, "Hey, remember that time Sally fell in Jordan Collins' parents' pool at 2 a.m.? And a wave of laughter rocked the room. Several people who didn't know the story started insisting it be told, and the person who had shouted was eager to oblige. Sally sat back and listened, laughing along with the others, shaking her head at the things they got wrong or embellished. Normally, she would have been embarrassed. It hadn't been her finest hour. But instead, she was just happy to see everyone smiling. "Happy Halloween," she whispered. She never missed a Halloween party in her life. And she wasn't going to start now. Hey there, it's the new year. You've got mood boards and resolutions, and work is back in full swing, and you don't need any extra stress in your life. And Factor's ready-to-eat meal delivery takes the stress out of meal planning and sets you up for success in the new year. Skip the grocery stores, prep work, and cooking fatigue. Instead, get chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals delivered right to your door, with over 35 meals to choose from per week, including options like keto, calorie smart, vegan plus veggie, and more. Plus over 55 weekly add-ons. You'll have a ton of nutritious and flavorful options to kickstart your resolutions. Forget frantic lunch preps and rush dinners. Factor's 2-minute meals are your secret weapon in the new year. Fuel up fast with restaurant-quality meals, all delivered right to your door. Factor now offers loads of snack options like breakfast, smoothies, juices, snacks, and more to keep me going no matter what's on the schedule. Skip the overpriced takeout trap. Factor is cheaper and way more delicious than takeout. Get chef-crafted, restaurant-quality meals delivered right to your door. They are ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes, which means more time for you. Need a special occasion meal? Gourmet Plus is the perfect solution if you're looking for fast, upscale options done easily. When things get hectic, Factor is flexible. Change up your order every week with plans from 4 to 18 meals per week. Or pause or reschedule your deliveries anytime. Stress less over meal times in the new year. Factor's no prep, no mess meals free up time otherwise spent on shopping, cooking, and cleanup. No more wasting time in the kitchen. Not only does Factor offer fast, simple solutions when I'm too busy to cook, they also help me stay on top of my goals. With offerings like Protein Plus and Keto, I can stay on track. This is definitely going to come in handy for my New Year's goals. Factor has everything I need for a week of flavorful, nutritious eats. In addition to ready-to-eat meals, they have cold-pressed juices, smoothies, energy bites, extra protein, veggie sides, and more to keep me energized during frantic times. Head to factormeals.com/scareyoutosleep50 and use code scareyoutosleep50 to get 50% off. That's code scareyoutosleep50 at factormeals.com. As many Scary to Sleep fans know, I've been going through a lot of changes in my life. And one thing I've been doing is getting my finances much more organized, and that includes paring down some of the subscriptions I pay for. It feels like everything is a subscription these days, be it for the gym or streaming services or music, the list goes on, and something that has helped me tremendously is Rocket Money. They not only helped me cancel subscriptions that were a pain to try to do myself. Have you ever tried to deal with some of these companies directly? It's just a headache. Rocket Money also alerts me when the subscriptions I did keep go up in price, giving me the ability to weigh my options and keep those little extras that add up oh so quickly in check. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills. I can see all of my subscriptions in one place, and if I see something I don't want, I can cancel it with a tap. I never have to get on the phone with customer service. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has helped save its members an average of $720 a year with over 500 million in canceled subscriptions. Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/scareyoutosleep. That's rocketmoney.com/scareyoutosleep. rocketmoney.com/scareyoutosleep. Next up, let's switch gears so quickly you'll get, well, you know. Here is a story by C.M. Cancel, a new author to the show, and oh, how I love fresh blood. Please enjoy C.M.'s story, Paralysis. It's happening again. The body count is stacking up. And I know that I'm to blame. I know why they didn't find the killer all those years ago. It's because I'm sitting here telling you this story free as a bird. And the bodies of girls they're finding now, all always in the woods behind a home, were found just like Molly's. Oh, my poor Molly. I should start there, huh? Back to Molly. Back to high school. Back to when and where it all began. Monday, September 20th, 2010. I bolted upright, finally able to awaken from my nightmare. Unsure of how long the experience of feeling my body being pressed down against the bed, chest heavy with the weight of the person holding me down. My breath was short and hurried. My body dripped with sweat like my asthma kicked in while cheering. Shivering from fright, pajamas sticking to my skin from a cold sweat. I rubbed my arms and noticed every hair on my body was raised. Looking around my room to make sure that everything was as it should be, I noticed the closet door was shut, as was my bedroom door, and only a sliver of light crept under. The window was closed, the lock in place. I listened closely, seeking out any noise out of the ordinary, but only the faint howl of the wind and a branch scratching against the window could be heard. Though I knew I was alone, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, something, was watching me, waiting. Laying back down, I tried desperately to steady my breathing. I shut my eyes tight in a feeble attempt to slow my racing heart. Pulling the down comforter back over my body, I replayed the dream I just had over in my head. Dr. Stein told me my vivid nightmares should have ceased by now, and writing the nightmares down could help. However, every time I tried to remember enough to jot something down, the memory would drift further and further away. I'd try and try until my head hurt and my ears began to ring. But like every time before, the dream slipped through my fingers like tiny grains of sand. The autumn moon was full that night, casting shadows around my room as the light shone through the trees. The bed creaked like a person trying to tiptoe down the stairs of an old house. The branch on the window sounded like nails scratching against the glass. The pipes groaning like people walking. The heaters clicking sounded as if someone were knocking. All I could do was stare up at my ceiling as the night sky faded into the fires of morning and the early birds began to sing. Eventually, I drifted off for a few minutes before my alarm went off and had to get ready for school. Eyes drooped with exhaustion, head tilted down. I slouched as I made my way to the shower. The cold water did nothing to wake me up. There were just too many sleepless nights for that. Slowly, I washed myself, trying to scrub away whatever it was that made my skin crawl. With skin bright pink, new scratches across my body. I finished, turned the water off, and continued to stand there, leaning against the wall for support. When would this stop? I remember wondering. When will I feel normal again? It was Monday, and that meant school. I remember standing in front of the mirror above the sink and cringing. The reflection staring back was a stark contrast to the person I once was. No longer did the strong, young gymnast and head cheerleader stare back at me with bright green eyes and a mischievous grin. Instead, my dull eyes were bloodshot, with large, dark circles underneath. The muscles I worked so hard for were gone. My ribs protruding outwards left my limbs long and lanky. Slowly, I pulled back the door to the medicine cabinet. With shaky hands, I pulled one pill out of the half-empty medication bottle. I glanced over at Mother's open door. She never kept it open. Perhaps she was running late for work this morning and had simply forgotten to close it. As I walked over to shut Mother's door, I noticed something even more peculiar. Both of her windows were open. With central AC, Mother never kept the windows open. She liked the house to always be at 72 degrees. No more and no less. Sometimes in the spring, she would open the windows for some fresh air. It was September. Cocking my head, I scrunched up my eyes and tried to think of why Mother would possibly do this.
Mother? Are you home, Mother?
I called out. Only the silence answered me. Muttering, barely a whisper. She must be at work. Perhaps she had painted her nails and opened the windows to let the fumes out. I closed the windows, making sure the latches were in place, and proceeded to close her door. While walking back to my room, I got that feeling I only get when under sleep paralysis. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and my breath caught in my throat. Rationalizing that no one could be watching me, I hurried into my bedroom and locked the door. As I hyperventilated, I looked around, but my room looked as it always did. The window was still closed. My bed was unmade, but everything else in its place. My desk had a few books evenly stacked in the right corner. The computer sat in the middle with a notebook to the left. My clothes were put away neatly in my dresser drawers. I opened the closet and chose a green flannel to wear and a pair of loose jeans. Sitting down to put my socks on, my gaze wandered over to my backyard, and my eyes rested upon the woods behind. I realized I was holding my breath, unevenly letting air escape my lips. Did something just move in the woods? I asked nobody. Just a trick of the shadows. Must be it. Still, I lingered for a few minutes, watching the backyard intently, just in case. How long had it been since I last entered those woods? Had it really been 2 years since that night I saw Molly? I shuddered as I thought back and was certain I would never forget that night for as long as I was alive. Downstairs, a note lay on the table. In neat, swooping handwriting, Mother had written that she was called into work early. A postscript reminded about my visit to the doctor the following day. Crumpling up the paper, I poured myself a bowl of cereal and a glass of orange juice. I ate quickly, wanting to leave the house as soon as possible. Leaving the dishes on the table, I grabbed my backpack and jacket and walked to school. The morning was beautiful. The air crisp, the trees covered in hues of orange, yellow, and red. Yet I didn't notice. I walked quickly with my head down, and eyes looking only at the ground. I didn't notice the people passing by, looking at me worriedly. I didn't hear their whispers or the fright in their voices. I focused only on the ground. When I arrived at school, I was called down to the guidance counselor before the homeroom bell even rang. Mrs. Davis was a respected and loved, petite older woman. Her gray hair was always tied up in a tight bun and wore an ironed black two-piece dress suit. Despite her authoritative stature, her voice was that of a typical grandmother. "Bella, your mother hasn't called us in weeks. She is supposed to keep us updated with your doctor appointments." "Mother has been working a lot. She picks up any shift she can and went in early today. I'll remind her tonight. I have my next appointment tomorrow." "Bella, that appointment was a few days ago. You have to start coming for therapy. You've quit cheer and gymnastics. Your grades have plummeted." Her voice dropped. "Listen, nobody blames you for Molly." Molly. My poor Molly. I shuddered at the mention of her name. Molly had been my neighbor, my very first childhood friend. I say had been, not because we're older now and have families of our own. No, I said had been because she's dead. Has been for a while. We grew up together as the best of friends. Both of us were rather nerdy, smaller than the rest of our class. We didn't grow womanly bodies like the other girls. Us two outsiders were inseparable. Until that last year of high school, when I became eye candy for the boys and girls, and the head cheerleader my freshman year. I left Molly behind. I hung my head and closed my eyes as the memories of that night came flooding in. I was sneaking back from a party. I didn't want to risk another punishment if I were caught, so I had to cut through the woods behind our houses to make it home quicker before Mother woke up for an early shift. I remember I had to lean from tree to tree for support, my eyes barely seeing despite the use of the flashlight on my phone. I knew I was more intoxicated than I cared to admit. Then I saw her. For some reason, Molly was also in the woods. I knew the shape of her, smiling at the thought of that one amazing night of reconnection. I'd never admit to my friends what happened. How Molly had always felt like home. Despite not talking to her all year, I still looked at her when she wasn't looking. I memorized the shape of her, the feeling of her hands in mine. I would always be fond of my first friend. But Molly walked oddly, dragging her left leg. I had thought perhaps she too was at the party and I just never noticed her. No, I would have. I always noticed Molly. When I stumbled closer, I knew something was wrong. But I was scared and nervous, even if I didn't know why. So I stopped in my tracks and hid behind a tree. Then she screamed. A scream I still hear in my dreams. It made my blood run cold. How did no one hear her? A man laughed as her screams turned into ragged gulps, too closely similar to a person drowning. Despite my athletic build, I remained behind that tree. What could I do to help? I'm a whopping 5'4". I heard footsteps rustling through the leaves as whoever was with Molly left. Only when I was certain that I could no longer hear the man walking away did I get up to check on Molly. But it didn't matter. There she lay, crumpled on the ground. Her face was unrecognizable from the gashes and bruises. Her shirt was soaked with blood. One arm bent in an impossible way behind her back. The other to her side. The hand with bitten fingers was not what made me want to puke. It was what was coming out from her shirt and stomach. Someone had ripped her innards out and had even taken several bites, as if her intestines were sausages. Bella? Mrs. Davis called my name then, bringing me back from that day. You come talk to me Monday, okay? I nodded, went back to class. The rest of the day blurred around me. Molly's name had brought me into my mind and memories. Everyone had their suspicions about the incident. However, I only said I found her like that. The police kept me in custody for the night. But with no prints and my friends upholding my alibi that I was at a party longer than I truly was, they let me go. The case remains open, actually, even 10 years later. That night, with Mother working another night shift, I drifted off to sleep with the night of Molly's murder, replaying over and over. Instead of being behind the tree, I was the person killing her. With a knife in her belly, I twisted it before ripping her open with my bare hands. Her screams cut short as I hit her face. My eyes were as red as my bloodied hands, and I just laughed as I pulled her insides out. I continued to laugh as I put her intestines to my mouth. Tuesday, September 21st, 2010. I bolted upright. Another early morning, waking up drenched in sweat and shaking from fear. I got up to shower. As I looked in the mirror, the face staring back at me was drenched in blood, the sink caked with dried flakes of crimson. I backed up, blinked, but only my scared face stared back. With my hands on the sink, I turned on the faucet to drink from the spout. Timidly, I looked back up to the mirror, hoping and praying the blood was a figment of my imagination. But it wasn't. The face staring back at me was smiling. The smile showed most of my teeth, my eyes wide. It scared me. It scared me even more when blinking and pulling my lips down into a frown didn't make the smile go away. The reflection's mouth moved to speak,
Are you afraid of yourself? Or what you've done?
My breath caught in my chest. It looked like me, yet didn't move as I moved. Mirabella twitched, moved in motions that seemed like a video speeding to catch up after a moment of buffering. The voice didn't sound like me either. Instead, it spoke in a low, raspy tone.
We both know your dreams are much more than that, don't we, Bella? Where is Mother? Huh? Where is Mother?
The reflection took a step closer. Its hands came out of the glass as it reached towards me and slowly began to crawl out of the mirror. Its movements were jagged, similar to how Molly had walked that night, but too fast. I fell backwards, hitting my head on the toilet. I woke up many hours later, in my bed, the sun already beneath the horizon. Getting up, I flinched as I touched the back of my head. It was slightly raised and tender. Had the bathroom incident really happened? I wondered. I didn't really trust my mind then. My reality had dwindled since Molly. I called out for Mother, but only the silence answered me. I went to my room and opened the door slowly. The bed was made and empty. I looked down at my feet. A tiny speckle of red stained Mother's floor. I looked around for anything out of the ordinary. That is when I noticed the tiny red speckles leading out of her room. No, I whispered over and over. My tears fell. My body trembled as I followed them out the door. Taking a deep breath in, I turned around and walked toward my kitchen. No note sat on the table, only my bowl from yesterday. I grabbed the phone and dialed Mother's cell phone number. Voicemail. Unsure of what to do, I went back to my room. Stopping in the middle of my tracks, I realized at that moment how odd it was that I actually remembered my nightmare. Running to my dream journal, I opened it to write down the account. The journal fell to the ground as I covered my mouth. In a rushed scrawl on every page, I had accounted for the very same thing. Every single page, word for word. The dream of that night with Molly. The window, now open, blew the journal's pages to the last page of my dream journal. The words that were written down for Molly were similar, except instead of her name, it read, Mother's. The walls were spinning. Memories of my bloody hands whirled through my head. I saw flashes of Molly's face, and then Mother's, back and forth, back and forth. I could feel the bile rising right before I fainted. When I regained consciousness, I made my way silently to the bathroom. Those next moments felt like someone else's memories. I remember I brushed my teeth and proceeded to take out the unopened bottle of my medication to flush the pills down the toilet. I remember I looked into the mirror, and my reflection was screaming as it banged from behind the mirror. The glass shook with every hit. I remember I turned my head toward Mother's room, my lips curling upward in that same sinister, full-toothed grin, following the tiny flecks of red out of Mother's room. I made my way back into the woods. But then, it's all black. Wednesday, September 22nd, 2010. The cops found me as the sun began to set. I told them everything. I told them about the night. I told them about my dream journal and the flecks of red in Mother's room. But when they searched the house, they found nothing. Well, almost nothing. Instead, they found a note from Mother saying she was sorry, but it was all too much, and she was leaving.
Bella.
The cop put his hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry, but your mother left you here. Mrs. Davis thinks you had a mental break from her leaving you, paired with Molly's murder. You're innocent. You must know this. Thursday, June 24th, 2021. I spent a year after that conversation in a psychiatric ward. I went on to graduate high school and earn a degree in psychology. It's been about 10 years since those days. But last weekend, in a box of stuff I had long forgotten about, I found the dream journal. I know now, I didn't have a mental break. I know now that all those memories are real. I know those memories are real, just as I know that if I were to walk to my mirror, my reflection will be smiling that creepy smile. I know that the dream I had last night of ripping apart the body of another missing girl wasn't a dream at all. I know it's me. Or rather, I know it's my reflection. And I know that the moment I fall asleep or try to turn myself in, she'll crawl out of the mirror with her twitchy movements, throw me back inside to where she stood and find another victim. So, I'm sorry. See, I know I drove here even if I don't remember getting in my car or tying you to this tree. What I do know is that, well, I'm getting tired. I haven't slept in several days and she's getting restless. I'm going to go inside now and sleep. When I wake up, it won't be me who comes to you, even though she'll look like me. Shh, please stop crying. It won't help you. Just take these pills. At least you'll be asleep for it. I'm sorry. I can't stop her. Shh. I'm going to sleep now. I'm sorry. Thanks for listening. Thank you so much to my authors this week. Please go check out Nina's new show, that is Twisted Mirror. Don't forget it. Again, first episode drops October 15th, but you can still go subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you can be ready and get a notification when that first episode comes out. I'm so excited for her. Also, yes, I did not manage to snag, like I said in the beginning, a copy of the trailer for my new show with Parcast, and I think that's the first time I've said it on air. Yes, it is with Parcast. I made sure I was allowed to say that at least. And I was actually given permission to tell you everything, but I'm going to wait because I want you all to find out with the rest of the world when the trailer is available and I can give you a sneak peek of the show. And I'm so excited. So I won't ramble too much this week. I hope you all had a great... I forgot the basics. Go follow the show on Twitter, Instagram. There's a Facebook group you can join. All of those have links in the show notes. My P.O. box is in the show notes. Also, if you send something to my P.O. box, I don't tend to check it very often. I just don't get a lot of stuff, and I don't mean that. Please don't take that as a reason to send me things, please. I have it for business purposes, so that is what it serves its purpose, don't worry. But I don't check it very often. So if you do send me something and it is something that may have maybe time sensitive, like something I don't know, that is perishable, I don't know why you would... I don't anticipate anyone sending me like loaves of bread, but if it is something that is maybe time sensitive or fragile, perhaps, just let me know, and I can run down there and get it. So thank you so much to anyone who sent me anything. Again, please don't take that as me begging for things. Please don't go out of your way. We're all having a rough year. It's just, I just wanted to let you know that just in case. I believe that since I don't have the new trailer, I don't have that many announcements. Yes, this episode was a little late. I thought I was going to receive the trailer today, and that's why I put off the episode an extra day, but I didn't, and it's okay. We will all just have to be patient. I have been patient for months. I'm so excited for this. And then, also, I put out an announcement on social media. I should probably announce this on the show. I said I was going to make this short, but this is important. So because of this new show that is coming out with Parcast, I had to extend my contract a little bit with Spotify, which is fine, but because I know I mentioned that the show would be back on all platforms starting today, and because of some last minute things, some outstanding things that needed to be done, that will not be happening until the end of October, early November, where the show will be back on different platforms. I really apologize. I know a lot of you were looking forward to the show being back on different, just available everywhere. And I understand. I totally understand. And I really do apologize. But this show is something, if you didn't see the social media post, I said, it's something I fought really hard for over the last year. Like, I bothered my boss every single day about it and getting me a show and figuring this all out, and I have to see it through. I have to see it through all the way, and I'm sure you'll understand, and I know you're gonna love the show when it comes out. So all right, I believe that's all. For baked goods, I don't know if I updated you last week. I made these peach crumble bars. I think that's what they're called. Crisp bars, crumble bars. I don't know. They were fantastic. If you want the recipe, let me know. I will send them to you. I had some peaches that I needed to use, and they were, oh my God, they were so good. I made some fresh whipped cream to go with them. Perfection. And then I made some banana bread. I always put chocolate chips and walnuts in my banana bread. How do you make your banana bread? I'm actually always in search of a really good banana bread recipe. I always kind of add to it. Like, I always add spices, and a lot of banana bread recipes don't have spices listed in the ingredients, which is weird because I don't feel like I've ever had a piece of banana bread without at least cinnamon in it. But if you have a favorite banana bread recipe, send it over. I'm always in search of like I don't have one that is like my main staple. I do always end up adding chocolate chips, walnuts, spices, all that good stuff. So let me know. I think that's all. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. We kicked off spooky season last week. You know that. Well, all year is spooky season over here at Scare You to Sleep. But you can see I am really keeping these episodes like autumn driven and Halloween driven, and I anticipate continuing that through the rest of the season. Also, if you have a Halloween story, like a Halloween-oriented submission or a fall-oriented submission you'd like to send it in, put that in the subject line so I know to take a look at that right away, because I have, and this is not a complaint, this is a blessing, but just so you know, for those of you who have sent in submissions, I have almost 300 submissions right now. So, yeah, I've been slowly going through those. And to be honest, yeah, if something catches my eye extra, then it gets bumped up to be on the show a little earlier. But I have 300 submissions to comb through. So if I haven't gotten to yours, you don't need to send it in like a bunch of times. I think I had someone send in theirs like 5 times. It's just that it's taking me a while to get to them. And it's, I'm only one man, one woman, one person here on this earth. Aren't we all? Aren't we all just one person here on this earth? All right, I will let you go. Remember to drink water, go get some sleep. Sweet dreams.